"Go slow, it hurts," she whispered. The cowboy swore to protect her. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. The small town of Willow Creek seemed almost frozen in the warmth of the evening, with the soft hum of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. On the edge of this quiet town, a modest farmhouse stood, surrounded by fields that had seen better days. Its wooden boards were worn and the paint had faded with years of sun and wind. But it was here that Leela lived, a young woman with a quiet strength that often went unnoticed by the busy townspeople. Lila had learned early in life how to face hardships alone. A few years ago, a terrible accident had left her with lingering pain, and though her body had slowly healed, the memory of that day still haunted her. Every movement carried a small reminder of what she had lost, and every sound in the night made her cautious. Despite this, she had refused to let her injury define her. She tended to her home, her small garden, and the few animals she could care for. Life was simple, but it was hers. That evening, as she bent over the garden, watering the dry soil, she felt a sharp twinge in her side. A small groan escaped her lips, but she shook it off and kept working. The sun dipped lower, and the shadows of the trees stretched across the yard, making the air feel cooler and heavier. Lila sighed and looked around. She had finished most of the chores, but there was still a long list to tackle before nightfall. Carrying the heavy watering can back to the house, she noticed movement near the edge of the property. A figure was walking slowly along the dirt road, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face. He moved with the easy confidence of someone used to the open land, yet there was a gentleness in the way he approached. Lila instinctively stepped back, her heart quickening. She didn't know this man, and strangers often brought trouble in small towns like Willow Creek. She tightened her grip on the watering can, whispering under her breath, "Go slow. It hurts." It wasn't just her body she worried about. It was the caution she had learned to carry in her heart. The man stopped a few feet away, tipping his hat slightly. His eyes, a warm brown, scanned her carefully, noticing the careful way she moved, the slight hesitation in her steps. "Evenin'," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "Name's Jack. I'm just passing through and thought I'd see if anyone needed help." Lila's first instinct was to shake her head and return to the house. She wasn't used to accepting help, especially from strangers, but something in the way he spoke, the steady patience in his tone, made her pause. She studied him for a moment, the lines on his sun-tanned face, the worn boots that had clearly walked many miles, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. There was something trustworthy about him, even if she couldn't yet explain why. I'm fine," she whispered, her voice almost lost to the wind. "Just go slow." She didn't want him to come closer. Pain wasn't just physical. It was also in the memories that her body carried, memories of being vulnerable and alone. Jack nodded, taking no step forward. "I understand." "I'll respect that. But if you need anything, even just a hand with chores, I'll be around." There was no pressure in his words, no rush, only a quiet offer of support. Over the next few days, Jack became a familiar figure at the edge of Lila's property. Sometimes he would be seen riding his horse along the dusty road, tipping his hat in greeting. Other times he lingered nearby, helping a neighbor or repairing a fence. Lila watched him from her porch, cautious but intrigued. There was a rhythm to his movements, a gentle steadiness that contrasted with the chaos of her own thoughts. One afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly, Lila struggled to carry a bucket of water to her small vegetable patch. The weight was too much, and she faltered, grimacing as pain shot through her shoulder. Before she could drop the bucket, a shadow fell over her, and Jack's voice called softly, "Here, let me help you." Her pride, forged through years of doing everything herself, told her to refuse. But the bucket was slipping from her hands, and the pain was too sharp to ignore. Reluctantly, she let him take it, and he carried it to the garden without a word. There was no judgment in his eyes, no impatience, only a quiet care that made her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Go slow. It hurts." Jack smiled faintly, setting the bucket down. "I will, I promise." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Lila pause. It was the first time someone had acknowledged her pain without trying to fix it or dismiss it. As days turned into weeks, Jack's presence became a quiet comfort. He didn't force his way into her life. He simply offered help when it was needed and respected her boundaries when it wasn't. Lila began to notice little things. The way he would bring extra water for her animals. The way he fixed the broken gate without being asked. The small gestures that showed he cared. Slowly, her walls began to lower, just enough for her to consider that maybe she wasn't alone in the world after all. One evening, as the sky turned deep purple and the first stars appeared, Jack found Lila sitting on the porch, her head resting in her hands. The day had been long and the pain in her side was sharp. He approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance, and said softly, "Long day?" Lila nodded, a small sigh escaping her lips. "It never ends," she whispered. "Sometimes I think it will, but then it doesn't." Jack sat down on the step beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "I know it feels that way sometimes," he said gently, "but you're stronger than you think. You've been through a lot, and yet here you are." She looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not really. Most people saw her as fragile or broken, but Jack saw her as someone who had survived, someone who had fought quietly every day to keep going. I don't want to burden anyone," Lila whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "I can handle it. I have to." "You're not a burden," Jack said firmly, "and you don't have to handle everything alone. That's not strength, it's just fear. Let someone help you. Let someone be there when it hurts." For the first time in years, Lila felt the weight of her solitude begin to lift, even if only a little. She glanced down at her hands, calloused and worn, and then back at Jack. There was a sincerity in his eyes that she couldn't deny. He wasn't there to pity her or to take over her life. He was there to protect her in whatever way she needed. That night, as Lila lay in bed, she replayed the day over and over in her mind. Jack's words, his gentle presence, the way he had respected her boundaries, everything felt new and strangely comforting. She realized that trust wasn't something she could force. It had to grow, slowly, like a seed in dry soil. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let it grow. In the days that followed, small moments continued to build the fragile bridge of trust between them. Jack would stop by occasionally to check on her, always careful to ask first before helping. Lila started to look forward to those moments, not because she needed him, but because she felt a rare sense of safety and understanding around him. Every smile, every quiet word, every gesture was a small thread weaving them closer together. The townspeople whispered about the young cowboy who had taken an interest in the quiet woman on the edge of town. Some were curious, some skeptical, but Lila no longer cared about their opinions. She had found someone who saw her not just for her pain, but for the courage it took to survive it. One afternoon, as a light breeze carried the scent of wildflowers through the air, Jack helped Lila repair a broken fence post. She winced slightly as she lifted a plank, and he caught it before it could fall. "Go slow. It hurts," she murmured. Jack nodded, steadying the plank. "I've got you," he said simply. "I promised, remember?" And in that moment, Lila realized something profound. For the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe she didn't have to face life alone. There was someone willing to walk beside her, carefully, patiently, protecting her from the things that hurt. It was a quiet promise, but one that felt stronger than any words she had heard before. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky turned a deep, velvety blue. Fireflies began to dance in the field, their tiny lights flickering in the growing darkness. Lila watched them for a moment, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She didn't know what the future held, or how much pain she would still face, but for the first time, she felt a small spark of hope. And that spark, fragile though it was enough to carry her through the night. The mornings in Willow Creek had a quiet rhythm, almost like a gentle heartbeat that pulsed through the town. Lila would wake early, as always, to tend to her small garden and the animals she cared for. Some days, the pain in her side made even the simplest tasks difficult, but she never allowed it to stop her completely. She moved carefully, whispering reminders to herself, "Go slow. It hurts." It had become a habit, a way to acknowledge her limits while still pushing forward. Jack had begun visiting more often, though always in a way that respected her space. He didn't intrude or make her feel pressured. He simply appeared when needed, his quiet presence offering support. On this particular morning, he arrived just as Lila was struggling with a stubborn gait that had become stuck after the night's frost. She tugged and pushed, gritting her teeth, but it wouldn't budge. "Need a hand?" Jack asked softly from the edge of the yard. His hat shaded his face, but there was no hiding the warmth in his eyes. Lila shook her head quickly, though a small part of her wanted to accept his help. I can manage," she said, her voice careful. "Go slow, it hurts." Jack smiled faintly, nodding. "I understand. I'll stay nearby, just in case." That morning, Lila worked slowly, her movements deliberate. But as she twisted to adjust a post, a sharp pain shot through her side, forcing her to stumble. Before she could fall, Jack was there, steadying her with firm hands. "Careful," he said quietly, making sure she was balanced. "No rush." Lila exhaled, feeling a mixture of gratitude and frustration. She hated needing help, yet she couldn't deny how much safer it felt to have Jack nearby. There was a strength in him that wasn't just physical. It was quiet, steady, and dependable. After the gate was fixed, Jack stayed to help with the animals. He fed the chickens, checked the water for the horses, and even fixed a loose fence in the back. Lila watched him work, noting how effortlessly he moved, how careful he was with each creature. For the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe someone could truly share the burdens of life with her. As the sun climbed higher, Lila decided to take a short break. She sat on the porch steps, wiping sweat from her forehead, and watched Jack as he tended to a young foal. The horse was nervous, but Jack's gentle voice and patient hands calmed it. Lila's chest tightened with a strange, unfamiliar feeling, something between admiration and relief. "You make it look easy," she murmured, almost to herself. Jack glanced up, smiling. "It's all about patience," he said. "Rushing never helps. You take it one step at a time, just like you're doing with yourself." Lila hesitated, then asked softly, Do you really mean that?" "I do," Jack replied. "I see how hard you work, how careful you are with every move. That's strength, Leela. You don't have to hide it or push yourself too far. You can let someone help, even if it's just a little at a time. For a moment, Lila felt the weight of years pressing on her chest. The solitude, the fear, the constant need to prove herself. But then she realized that Jack wasn't judging her. He wasn't pitying her. He was simply acknowledging her struggle, offering his support without taking over. It was a rare and precious thing. Over the following days, their routine became a quiet rhythm of trust. Jack would help when needed, Lila would work at her own pace, and slowly, the space between them became comfortable rather than tense. They didn't need to fill every silence with words. Sometimes, just being near each other was enough. One afternoon, as a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, Lila confided in Jack about the accident that had changed her life. She spoke hesitantly at first, her voice barely audible, describing the moment she had fallen and how the pain had lingered long after. Jack listened without interruption, his expression calm, his eyes attentive. "It sounds terrible," he said finally, after she paused. "I can't imagine how hard it must have been." Lila nodded, fighting back tears. "It's more than just the pain," she admitted. "It's the way it made me feel, like I couldn't trust anyone, like I had to face everything alone." Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be alone," he said softly. "Not anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Those words, simple though they were, carried a weight Lila hadn't felt in years. She felt a small, tentative hope growing in her chest, fragile but undeniable. She realized that trust could be built slowly, step by step, and that maybe she was ready to let it grow with Jack. As the weeks passed, Jack's presence became a part of her daily life. He would help repair fences, fetch supplies from town, and even teach her small tricks for handling the animals more safely. Lila began to see him not just as a helper, but as a partner in her day-to-day survival. The bond between them deepened, though neither spoke of it directly. It was understood in small gestures, a hand offered, a supportive glance, a quiet word of encouragement. One evening, a new challenge arrived in the form of a group of troublemakers passing through Willow Creek. They were known for causing minor chaos, scaring the townspeople, and taking advantage of anyone they perceived as weak. When they noticed Lila working alone, they began making crude remarks and trying to intimidate her. Lila froze, her heart pounding. She had faced difficulties before, but confrontation terrified her. She whispered to herself, "Go slow. It hurts," as if the words could shield her from harm. But before she could react further, Jack appeared, his presence calm yet commanding. "Leave her be," he said firmly, stepping between Lila and the group. His voice was steady, carrying an authority that made the troublemakers pause. One of the men sneered. "And who are you supposed to be?" "Her knight in shining armor?" Jack didn't flinch. "I'm someone who doesn't like seeing people bullied. Step aside or you'll regret it." The tension in the air was thick, but Jack's confidence never wavered. Slowly, the men backed off, muttering threats under their breath before disappearing down the road. Lila exhaled, a mixture of fear and relief washing over her. She realized that Jack's promise to protect her wasn't just words, it was a commitment he would act on without hesitation. That night, as they sat on the porch after the sun had set, Lila finally allowed herself to speak. I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "I've been through so much, and you've been here for me without asking anything in return." Jack shrugged lightly, his eyes meeting hers. "You don't have to thank me. I made a promise to help, and I intend to keep it. That's all." She looked at him, her chest tight with emotion. For the first time, she felt safe admitting her fears, sharing her vulnerabilities without fear of judgment. It's just, sometimes it hurts so much, and I'm scared I'll never be okay. Jack reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You will be okay," he said firmly. "It won't happen all at once, and it won't be easy, but you're stronger than you think, and I'll be here every step of the way." In the days that followed, Lila began to notice changes within herself. She moved with more confidence, though still cautiously. She laughed more freely, smiled more often, and allowed herself to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, watching the sunrise, feeling the wind on her face, tending to her animals, and through it all, Jack was there, silently guiding, supporting, and protecting. Their bond deepened not through grand gestures, but through countless small moments. A shared meal, a quiet conversation, a hand offered when needed. Lila learned that trust could be built slowly, patiently, with care and understanding. And Jack learned that true protection wasn't just about defending someone from danger. It was about standing beside them, letting them face life's challenges with courage, and knowing when to step in. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the fields, Jack helped Lila with a particularly stubborn task, repairing the roof of the small barn. She climbed slowly, each step deliberate, her heart pounding. "Go slow. It hurts," she whispered, her hands gripping the wooden beams tightly. Jack followed behind, steadying the ladder and offering words of encouragement. "Take your time," he said. "I've got you." Together they worked through the afternoon, finishing the repairs as the sky turned shades of pink and purple. Lila felt a sense of accomplishment, not just from the work done, but from the knowledge that she wasn't alone. As twilight settled over Willow Creek, Lila and Jack sat on the porch, watching the stars begin to appear. A quiet understanding passed between them. Words weren't always necessary. They had built something stronger than friendship, something based on trust, patience, and the quiet strength of being there for each other. And for Lila, that was more healing than she could have imagined. The days in Willow Creek were slowly settling into a comfortable rhythm, but beneath the calm, the world could still be unpredictable. Lila had grown more confident, though the shadow of past pain lingered in her every cautious movement. Jack had become a constant in her life, a quiet presence that reminded her she didn't have to face challenges alone. She trusted him more than she ever thought possible, but trust, she had learned, could be tested at any moment. It began on an ordinary afternoon. Lila was in the barn, feeding the horses and checking on the chickens. Jack was nearby, repairing a fence post that had been loosened by the wind. The sun hung high, casting long, warm rays across the fields. Everything seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful, and Lila had learned that in small towns like Willow Creek, peace could be fragile. She was just turning to fill a water bucket when she heard voices, low and menacing, coming from the road that ran past her property. Her heart tightened. The same troublemakers who had tried to intimidate her weeks ago were back. They laughed loudly, their words carrying across the field, filled with mockery and challenge. Lila froze, fear gripping her chest. Jack noticed her sudden stillness and followed her gaze. His expression hardened, but his movements were controlled and deliberate. "Stay here," he said softly. "I'll handle this." "No," Lila whispered, her voice shaky. "Please, go slow, it hurts." Jack nodded, understanding her plea, not just for caution, but for emotional support. "I've got you," he said. "Just stay behind me." The men approached, their smirks growing wider as they saw Jack standing protectively in front of Lila. "Well, look what we have here," one of them sneered. "The little farm girl and her fancy cowboy friend. Don't you think you're outnumbered?" Jack's eyes met theirs steadily. "I'm not here for a fight, but I won't let you hurt her," he said, his voice calm but firm. There was no threat in his words, only certainty, and that certainty carried weight. One of the men stepped closer, clearly trying to provoke Jack. "And what are you going to do about it?" he challenged. Jack didn't flinch. He simply planted his boots firmly, keeping his hands relaxed at his sides. "You'll regret it if you cross her," he said quietly. It was not anger that fueled him. It was determination, the kind that comes from a promise made and a heart committed to protect someone in need. The confrontation stretched in tense silence, broken only by the men's low laughter and the distant sounds of the town. Lila's hands gripped the edge of the barn door tightly, fear and anticipation making her heart race. She had always faced challenges alone, but this time she was standing beside someone who was unafraid to face danger for her. Suddenly, one of the troublemakers lunged forward, trying to grab a crate near the barn. Jack moved with quiet precision, intercepting him and pushing him back without using excessive force. The others hesitated, unsure of how to react to his calm, unwavering confidence. "Leave her alone," Jack said again, his tone carrying a weight that made the men pause. "I don't want trouble, but I won't stand by while you scare someone who hasn't done anything to you." For a moment it seemed like the men might back down, but just as quickly, one of them pushed forward, throwing a punch toward Jack. Jack dodged, keeping his focus on protecting Lila, not on retaliation. His movements were deliberate, controlled, and precise. Each action was calculated, ensuring no one would be seriously harmed, yet making it clear that he would not allow them to intimidate her. Lila's heart pounded in her chest. She had seen courage before, but never like this. It wasn't just about strength. It was the way Jack moved with care, protecting her without letting fear take over. Every instinct told her to hide, to flee, but she stayed, trusting that he would keep her safe. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the men finally backed down. They muttered threats under their breath, but their confidence had been shaken. Jack's calm, steady presence had made it clear that Lila was not alone, and that crossing her meant facing someone who would not hesitate to defend her. When the danger passed, Jack turned to Lila, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Lila nodded, though her hands were still trembling. I think so," she whispered. "I've never felt so safe before." Jack gave a small, reassuring smile. "You're safe now," he said simply. "I promised. Remember?" Tears threatened to spill from Lila's eyes. She realized that the weight of fear she had carried for years could be eased, slowly, by someone who truly cared. She hadn't just survived the encounter. She had done it, knowing she wasn't alone, and that realization brought a strange sense of relief, almost like a burden being lifted from her shoulders. In the days that followed, Lila noticed subtle changes in herself. She moved with a little more confidence, though still cautiously. She laughed more freely, even when small mishaps occurred on the farm. And she began to accept Jack's help more readily, no longer feeling that it was a weakness to let someone share her burdens. Jack, for his part, remained patient and steady. He never pressured her, never forced her to face her fears before she was ready. Instead, he guided her, offering encouragement and support whenever she needed it. Together, they repaired fences, tended to animals, and managed the small tasks that kept the farm running. Their partnership grew naturally, rooted in trust and understanding. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the quiet sounds of the countryside. Lila leaned back, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "I never thought I'd feel like this," she admitted softly. "Like I could rely on someone without fear." Jack glanced at her, his eyes warm. "It takes time," he said gently. "Trust isn't something you give all at once. It's built slowly, step by step, and you've been doing it, even if you didn't realize." Lila smiled faintly. "I guess I've been learning how to accept help without feeling weak." "You're not weak," Jack said firmly. "You've survived more than most people could handle. Letting someone stand with you doesn't take away from that. It makes you stronger." Their quiet conversation stretched into the evening, filled with unspoken understanding. No grand declarations were needed, just the knowledge that they were there for each other, ready to face whatever challenges came next. But life, as it often does, had more tests in store. A week later, a severe storm rolled into Willow Creek. The sky darkened with heavy clouds, and the wind howled across the fields. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, soaking the earth and making the roads slick and dangerous. Lila's small farmhouse creaked under the force of the storm, and her heart raced with worry for the animals and the property she had worked so hard to protect. Jack arrived quickly, riding through the rain on his sturdy horse. "Hold on!" he shouted over the wind, tying his horse near the barn before rushing to help Lila secure the animals. Together they moved with urgency, bringing the horses into the barn and checking that the chickens were safe in their coop. Lila's hands shook from the cold and the effort, but she felt a sense of calm knowing Jack was there. "Go slow." "It hurts," she murmured, her words barely audible over the storm. Jack nodded, adjusting the gate to secure the barn. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady. "We'll get through this together." Hours passed as the storm raged outside. The wind tore at the roof, rain flooded the fields, and lightning flashed across the sky. But inside the barn, Lila and Jack worked side by side, their movements synchronized, their trust in each other unspoken but complete. By the time the storm passed, the farmhouse and animals were safe. Lila was soaked and exhausted, but she felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. Jack's presence had not just protected her physically, it had given her the courage to face a danger she could not control. That night, as they sat by the fireplace drying off and warming themselves, Lila spoke quietly. "I never realized how much it helps to have someone beside you, not to fix everything, but just to stand with you." Jack reached out, brushing her hair back gently. "You're never alone," he said. "Not as long as I can help it." For Lila, those words were more than comfort. They were a promise that no matter what challenges came, she had someone who would protect her, guide her, and stand by her side. And for the first time in years, she felt truly safe, not just from the world around her, but from the fear that had once held her back. The days that followed were filled with quiet recovery. Lila's confidence grew, and Jack continued to be a steady presence in her life. Their bond, forged in small acts of care and trust, had been strengthened by the trials they faced together. And while the future was still uncertain, one thing was clear. Lila no longer had to face it alone. The storm had passed, leaving Willow Creek washed in the soft glow of early morning light. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh grass, carrying with it a sense of calm and renewal. Lila stepped outside her small farmhouse, stretching her stiff limbs as she surveyed the land. The barn was intact, the animals were safe, and for the first time in a long while, everything seemed peaceful. Jack stood nearby, his hat tipped low against the morning sun, checking the fence along the edge of the property. When he noticed Lila watching him, he gave a small wave, his eyes reflecting warmth and reassurance. Over the past weeks, they had shared so much. Small acts of care, quiet conversations, moments of vulnerability, and through it all their bond had grown stronger. Lila felt a quiet happiness she had never known, a sense that life, despite its hardships, could still hold beauty and connection. "Morning," Jack said as he approached, brushing the sweat from his brow. His voice was soft, carrying no urgency, only calm attention. "How's everything?" Lila smiled, feeling her heart lighten. "Better," she said simply. "Thanks to you." Jack shook his head, offering a humble smile. "It's not just me. You've done most of the work yourself. I'm just here to help when it's needed." She nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more willing to accept support, and she knew that Jack had been beside her every step of the way, guiding her, protecting her, and showing her that she didn't have to face life alone. The days that followed were filled with quiet routines, a rhythm that Lila had grown to cherish. She worked in her garden, tended to the animals, and repaired the fences, all with Jack nearby. Sometimes he worked silently, fixing what needed fixing, and other times they shared small moments of conversation, laughter, and encouragement. Their relationship had become one of unspoken understanding, built on patience, trust, and quiet care. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the fields, Lila noticed that a section of the fence along the far corner of her property had become loose. She hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar twinge of pain in her side. "Go slow. It hurts," she whispered under her breath. Jack, who had been nearby checking the water troughs, immediately came to her side. "I'll handle it," he said softly. "You just stay close." Together they worked on the fence. Jack held the post steady while Lila hammered the boards into place, their movements synchronized through practice and mutual understanding. The work was steady and careful, a reflection of the bond that had developed between them. Lila realized that she no longer feared needing help, that relying on someone didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. As the fence was finally secured, Lila stepped back to admire their work. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the fields. Jack leaned against the post, wiping his hands on a cloth, and looked at her with quiet pride. "Looks good," he said simply. Lila smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "It does," she agreed, and for the first time she felt the deep satisfaction of completing something together, not alone, but with someone who truly understood and supported her. That evening, as twilight settled over Willow Creek, Lila and Jack sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The sky was clear and vast, and the gentle sounds of crickets and rustling leaves filled the night. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the storm and the danger they had faced in previous weeks. "I never thought I'd feel this calm," Leela said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Like I can actually breathe again." Jack reached out, resting a hand lightly on hers. "You can," he said gently. "You've worked hard to get here, and you've allowed yourself to heal. That's not easy, Lila, but you've done it." She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't dared to feel before. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled, his eyes warm and steady. "And I couldn't have done it without you either," he said. "You've taught me patience, courage, and the quiet strength of facing life step by step." We've helped each other, in our own ways." Lila felt a surge of emotion, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She realized that for the first time in years, she felt truly safe, not just from the world around her, but from the fear and loneliness that had once defined her life. Jack had kept his promise to protect her, but in doing so, he had also shown her the power of trust, companionship, and love. The following weeks brought a new sense of purpose to their days. Lila began to take on small projects she had once avoided, from planting new vegetables in her garden to repairing the barn roof that had been weakened by the storm. Jack was always nearby, offering guidance and support, never rushing her, never pushing too hard. One afternoon, as they worked on a particularly tricky repair in the barn, Lila paused, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulder. "Go slow. It hurts," she whispered, as she carefully lifted a beam into place. Jack was immediately at her side, steadying the wood. "I've got you," he said simply. "Every step." Together, they completed the work, and Lila felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about finishing the task. It was about realizing that she could face challenges with someone by her side, someone she trusted completely. Their partnership extended beyond physical tasks. They shared quiet moments of conversation, laughter, and reflection. Jack would listen as Lila spoke of her hopes and fears, offering encouragement without judgment. She had never experienced this kind of companionship before, and it brought her a sense of peace that words could scarcely capture. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Lila turned to Jack, her voice soft but firm. "I think I'm ready to face life fully now. Not just survive it, but really live it." Jack nodded, his expression gentle. "You are ready, and I'll be here every step of the way, not just to protect you from harm, but to stand with you, to face everything together." Lila smiled, a mixture of relief and hope filling her chest. "I never thought I'd feel this way, like I have someone who truly cares, someone I can trust completely." "You do," Jack said softly. "And you always will." In the days that followed, Lila embraced life with newfound courage. She worked in her garden, cared for her animals, and even ventured into town more often, interacting with neighbors she had once avoided. With Jack by her side, she felt a sense of security that allowed her to grow, to explore, and to enjoy the small pleasures of life. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Jack and Lila walked together along the dirt road leading to the town. The air was crisp and fresh, and the world seemed full of possibility. They moved side by side, comfortable in each other's presence, speaking little but understanding much. "I've come to realize something," Lila said after a moment, her voice thoughtful. "Strength isn't about facing everything alone. It's about knowing when to let someone stand with you, when to trust, and when to accept help." Jack nodded, smiling. "Exactly. And you've done all of that while still keeping your courage and determination? That's true strength." For the first time in years, Lila felt fully at peace with herself and her world. The pain she had carried, both physical and emotional, had not disappeared entirely, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to navigate life carefully, step by step, with someone she trusted by her side. That evening, as twilight fell and stars began to shine in the clear night sky, Lila and Jack sat on the porch, enjoying the quiet comfort of companionship. The world around them was calm, and for the first time, Lila felt that she could truly face whatever the future held. Jack reached out, taking her hand in his. "We've come a long way," he said softly, "and no matter what comes next, we'll face it together." Lila squeezed his hand, a smile spreading across her face. Yes, together. In that moment, the quiet promise they had shared, The promise to protect, to care, and to stand together felt unbreakable. It was not a promise made lightly, but one forged through trials, trust, and understanding. Lila knew that she would never face life alone again. As the night deepened, the stars twinkled above Willow Creek, shining like tiny beacons of hope. Lila looked up at them, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. She had survived her pain, faced her fears, and discovered the strength to embrace life fully. And she had done it with someone who truly cared, someone who had kept his promise, someone who had become more than a protector. He had become her companion, her friend, and her unwavering support. For the first time in years, Lila felt a happiness that was steady and enduring, a joy born not from escape, but from facing life fully, with trust, love, and courage. And as she sat beside Jack, holding his hand and feeling the warmth of his presence, she whispered quietly to herself, a smile on her lips, "I am safe, I am ready, and I am not alone."